Hi, I'm Jonathan Treussard, and welcome to Treussard Talks, where we talk about the mechanics of investing, the psychology of investing, and what it means to manage your wealth with purpose. Because understanding your wealth shouldn't be as complex as building it. Welcome to today's show. Dave Kotok, it's such a pleasure to have you, a real honor. You are the co-founder of Cumberland Advisors. You started the firm in 1973. You've been CEO, CIO, and now strategic advisor. You've been frequently cited in the press, the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Bloomberg, you name it. I want to hear more about your education, going from economics to organizational dynamics and beyond. You and I bonded over our belief that behavioral finance is an important field and that understanding history is critical. You've been noted for your civility in a world that lacks civility, particularly today. But I think the quote that has stuck with me the most is one from Jim Bianco, someone I respect very much, who said, "Most people in this business are afraid of their shadow. They're trying to go to great pains to say nothing. But David is not like that. So let's get in there. Let's actually say something. But how did you get into this mess in the first place?"
Oh my gosh, Jonathan, what an introduction. I don't know who you're talking about. When it comes to civility, my grandchildren would agree with you, but my children might disagree from time to time. However, we do the best we can. So, how did I get into this business? You mean financial services? You mean geopolitics, studying history?
All of the above, because I think they're all interconnected.
Well, I grew up as a kid working in a grocery store in a small town in New Jersey, and 10 years working in a family grocery store was the best education of all. 3 degrees from the University of Pennsylvania can stack up, but the grocery store is far better. You learn how to be nice to people. You have to wait on a customer. You have to go down in the basement and sort tomatoes and bring up the ripe ones and put them in the grocery store and make them look pretty and wipe them off. That was my first experience. And my grandfather, bless his memory, when he retired, he liked to go to Newburger, which was the name of the local brokerage office. And I would go with him. He would buy me an ice cream cone. That was the bribery. Get me to either go fishing with him or go to watch the stock market. And he would sit with a bunch of old timers and they would talk about the market. And when I was about 11, I became a quote boy. And a quote boy stood on a large blackboard with chalk and wrote the prices so everybody in the room could see what the price was of General Motors or AT&T or whatever it was. And then my grandfather said, "I think I'm going to let you trade a stock." So he opened an account in his name because I was a minor. And in those days, he said to the manager, "Let him trade this money." And that was my introduction to finance and my introduction to work. And I've never lost that. So he used to say, "You catch more flies with honey than with vinegar." And that was a family expression. It's an old cliche. I'm sure most people have heard it along the way. So I don't see why we have to be practitioners of hatred. And it's very sad to see the times having evolved. So the haters have such a prominent position now.
I could not agree
Yeah.
more. And so the family grocery store, your grandfather had started it?
My great grandfather, David Kotok, was the corner grocer at 6th and Landis in Vineland, New Jersey, at the turn of the last century. I have a photograph of David Kotok and his oldest son, a teenager, my grandfather, standing in front of Kotok's Market. The photograph was taken in 1907.
Wow. And that David Kotok had been in the US for a long time. He was new arrival.
He,
Do you know the family history very much?
I very much do. Yes, he was an immigrant.
From where?
You could argue Ukraine or Russia or the Pale of the Settlements or Tsarist Russia, depending on your point of view. But
Sure.
one side of the family comes there, the other side of the family was expelled by Spain in the Torquemada regime.
Yeah.
and ended settling in Ukraine near Odessa. And the first ancestor from the Ukrainian side was in the United States in 1886. So I look at what's going on in the world now, and I think of my own history on the Ukrainian side. And I had an ancestor that left Ukraine to get to the United States and got here in 1886.
Yeah.
The ones that didn't leave had to deal with Russian persecution. The ones who got out after that escaped, and they had to deal with Stalin's persecution, the Holodomor, and starvation in Ukraine. And if that's not enough, any remnant family members now deal with Mr. Putin. So for me, the lens through which I see the world has lots of history that's familial, in addition to being a student of history, which I am.
Yeah, I think that's so important to be grounded in history, both intellectually and emotionally. My wife's family is Jewish. I grew up in Paris, but my grandfather was a farm boy in Brittany and was very active in the resistance. His father was the mayor of the town, and they used their resources to protect people, to help for safe passage, and ultimately resist. And when my grandfather met my wife for the first time, this was in Drancy, where I grew up, right outside of Paris, which was infamous, is infamous in history because it is where the French police collaborated
Yeah.
with the Nazi occupant to house Jews on their way to the camps, French Jews. And we went to a memorial place in Drancy, and my grandfather broke down in tears, gave a hug to my wife, and said, "I did what I did so you could be here today." And I think we all have these family stories, if we're lucky, that ground us in why this matters. Being a student of history actually teaches you something about the version of ourselves that we want to be. And I think that's really, really critical. Thank you for sharing. That means a lot to me. You, again, have this very complex education that covers a lot of ground, different disciplines. How is that informed kind of how you think about the world today and really how you process information, how you process reality?
All my life, I have been interested in the study of history and learning from it. Those are two separate things. Churchill was very clear about that. After he was prime minister, after the war, he gave a speech. I forgot now whether it was in Oxford or Cambridge or something, but he was asked by students, "What's the most important thing in your career?" And he said, "Study history, study history, study history. And when you're exhausted, study more history." And he was right. Uh, I'm fascinated. I just finished the book. You know about the book. So it's over my shoulder. It's my fifth book, and it took 4 years, and I have three wonderful co-authors. It was triggered by a research paper that was published very early in the COVID outbreak by the San Francisco Fed. And Christine and I are sitting in an apartment wiping cardboard boxes in our front door to get dinner. And I read this paper and I said, my gosh, these every once in a while, you get a real glimmer, a spark of genius in a research paper. I mean, as you know, and in my lifetime, I've read 1,000 research papers or something like that. And 990 of them always end with more research is needed.
Hmm.
That's the classic. But but they really got onto something. They used the Bank of England database. They studied 800 years of history. They identified 19 pandemics over 800 years. So from Black Death to COVID.
Yeah.
And they defined what they were. And here they have this marvelous set of data. And they derive a Wixelian model. Modern people may not know Wixell's really the first economist, the Swedish economist, who really identified what a neutral R star would be. So
And
yeah.
define neutral R star for our audience.
Well, so for the audience, it would be the neutral real interest rate that would be at the point in which a change in interest rate would either trigger more inflation or less inflation, or more growth or less growth. What is the true neutral real interest rate? And if you are at that real neutral interest rate, then monetary policy and financial influences are at neutral.
Right.
Now,
Neither stimulating nor cooling, so on and so
that's
forth.
right. That is the holy grail of every central bank and every monetary economist and every financial structure in the world. But once you know what that is, then you can know if you want to be more stimulative or less stimulative, and how much and what. So they used the classic model. And what they found is, using the classic model, every epidemic, pandemic, and plague has the same trajectory and outcome. The degree may vary, and that's really, I've found in my work, that depends on how many people die. But what they found is there are no exceptions in history. Now, think of an economic model that has no exceptions in history. Their paper triggered this book. So what we did is we said, well, wait a minute, if they're right, we could find more evidence of this elsewhere in history. And in fact, we went all the way back to antiquity and found it without exception. We had to draw inferences. For example, in Rome or in Greece, wage rates were hard to find because the slaves performed the labor. But we found them in the wages paid to mercenaries, with job descriptions of mercenaries and infantrymen and chariot drivers and hoplites. And we found it in Rome. So we found the patterns. We could draw inferences over 3,500 years of history. I recently just published a piece based on their research and the continuation of it, in which we are currently, right now, in a transitional phase from pandemic economics, plague economics, where the neutral rate fall, going into war finance, where the neutral rate rises. And that's happening right now. Now, the question is, what happens? Why one and why the other? So if you think an epidemic, pandemic, or a plague, people die. Capital doesn't die. It remains. So poor people who live inherit, but they inherit from poor people. They don't have very much. The household didn't have very much before either. Rich people inherit from rich people and get richer. Savings gets more concentrated. Per capita savings goes up. At the same time, the shock of an epidemic, pandemic, or a plague alters the population's behavior or reduces the number. So in the old days, what happened? You had a farmer had 10 fields. He was selling his crops. Now he really only needed 9 because there's fewer buyers. What field did he allow to lie fallow? The least productive field. So productivity per capita went up. Now think about what I just described. Savings per capita, wealth per capita goes up. Productivity per capita goes up. What do you get? You get sources of capital redeploying where productivity gains are happening. The neutral rate goes down. Inflation pressures go down. And in fact, that has repeated, and it happened in COVID briefly. Remember, time concentrates. Time 5 centuries ago, it took longer. Now it takes 7 seconds, but that's the nature of the beast. When you go to war, you still use debt and deficit finance. But what you're doing is financing consumption in large amounts with increasing amounts. Example, you buy a tank. The minute you buy the tank, it's either obsolete because there'll be a new version that'll render it unable to defend itself, or It'll get blown up in war. Same thing happens with a drone. It makes no difference. In the old days, it could be a catapult against a city wall. Happened no matter where. So you go from the epidemic, pandemic, plague shock to the war financed, debt financed, inflationary shock. And wars do produce productivity gains, but they come after, they come later. And what are we doing now? Worldwide, not just the United States. We got $1 trillion defense budget, we have an expanding deficit, and we have deployed an additional war sleeve in masked men who are incarcerating people and arresting them. And you might say, well, gee, that's not an army. Well, I don't know. Take a look at history and see what it
Yep.
looks like. So we've rapidly moved from paradigm one to paradigm two. The neutral interest rate's rising.
It's really interesting you talk about military technology. That's something that I've had an interest in for a long time because I was a student of Earl Thompson at UCLA. And Earl Thompson made a point of highlighting ratio of, for lack of a better description as an economist, labor to capital in warfare. And in the post-Napoleonic era, through Vietnam, a huge amount of war was bodies, was massive million people armies. And before that, we had a more capital intensive military technology. And since the end of Vietnam, and we've moved to professional armies and drones and all the things you just described, capital has come back to the forefront of warfare, which has massive implications for things like, social
Killing ability.
correct, but also just kind
Mo-
of, yeah,
yes.
internal equilibria. How do we feel about our middle class when we don't need their sons and daughters to fight our wars, that sort of thing. But I think what you're describing makes a lot of sense, which is in a world where really warfare is about putting out a bunch of capital, arguably borrowing to put out.
Exactly. Not just the United States, China, Germany. Look
Yeah.
everywhere in the world. So if you have a world paradigm shift to higher borrowing, more financing, where the political decision is not to impose the current cost of the increment of war machine on the current population, because that means taxation. So we are expanding leverage into a war finance economy and into the tools of war in a modern way. And we're sitting here today wondering if we're going to have some inflation.
Yeah. Let's wander away. That's
History's on my side, Jonathan. Every war has inflation.
It's among the most inflationary human behaviors we can engage in. Part of it is what's the alternative thing, where in a lot of ways, when defense becomes a necessity, protecting the state does become an imperative. And as a result of that, we say, hey, you know what? Let's take on debt, which means burdening the future generations. And one or two things is going to happen. Either the state survives and, we'll have to deal with it, or the state doesn't survive. Tell us about the name of the book and where to find it and all of that.
The book is The Fed and the Flu. There is a website, thefedandtheflu.com, and there are reviews on it and directions as to where to buy it. And if somebody looks up Kotok in Amazon book, it'll come up along with the old books. Don't read the old books, they're out of date. But the new book, if you like history, you may find it enjoyable.
Thanks for listening. I'm Jonathan Treussard, founder of Treussard Capital Management. I hope you're enjoying this episode. If you'd like to start receiving my free newsletter, Wealth Empowered, or if you'd like to learn more about me and Treussard Capital Management, go to Treussard.com. That's TREUSSARD.com. Thanks, and enjoy the rest of the episode. All right, there's something else that is famously associated with your last name, Kotok, and it's not just a book. It's something called Camp Kotok. I'd love for our listeners to hear about the origin of this retreat that has become really a place for thinkers and just intellectuals to come together around matters of society and matters of finance and how you run it. I understand it's run under the Chatham House rules. I understand fishing is involved. I haven't attended, but I think it has become something that is central in the world that I inhabit, investment management, asset management, finance. How did this all come about?
Well, long ago, there were periods, and I have been going to the same village in Maine near the Canadian border. Think of it as, say, 2 hours north of Bangor, Maine.
Yeah.
And I've been going, this is my 36th year. I used to say to a couple of folks, hey, come with me for a weekend. Let's go out in the woods, go fishing a little bit. I know a place where we can get away and we can talk about the world without distractions. And that would be one or two or three or six, small, very small number. Most of the time, my economist friends and financial types would say, go to up there. Oh, how far? They gave me all the reasons not to go. At the conference in the World Trade Center on 9/11, which was national meeting of NABE, and that Tuesday morning was our plenary session in the ballroom of the Marriott Hotel that abuts or actually adjoins the South Tower. So we were in the center when the North Tower was hit. We were in a meeting. The speaker was the president of Morgan Stanley talking to a plenary session breakfast. He had saved his life, he says. I came down for this thing, which is why I got to the ground level. So we had a reunion afterwards, maybe 5, 6 months after, and people came to me. I didn't raise the issue, and they said, you've invited me to come with you to Maine, and I always said no. Harvey Rosenblum, who was the director of research at the Dallas Fed at the time, is a good example. He used to go fishing, go in the woods with mosquitoes. I don't want to do that. He comes to me and he says, I want to go with you this year. Somebody else says, I want to go with you this year. And so what went from 3, 4, 5, 6 guys going out for a weekend fishing in the woods expanded. Camp Kotok, from that point forward, became a larger group with more and more people wanting to come. And we have preserved the informality so that people can have dialogue. We do a public session. This year, we'll do 4. They are usually a dinner speech or a panel discussion. This year, the theme is geopolitics and war finance, and the economics of drone and high-tech warfare. And so we're going to have 4 nights in a row devoted with some program, and 3 of the 4 will be public. We'll suspend Chatham House rule. People can go crazy with social media, or they can run videos and all that stuff. And whenever we do that, I don't know, we wind up reaching a couple million people around the world by the time it gets done. We've had coverage up there, as you know, CNBC, Bloomberg, New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Yahoo Finance. Rick Newman from Yahoo Finance is moderating the panel on defense on Saturday night. So it's gotten a lot of notoriety. Some of the people actually know how to go fishing. Otherwise, we have to get the guides to teach them. So we have a group that we've had people from all over the world, sort of a camp for adults kind of thing. But very nice, hot water, clean sheets, and good food.
That sounds promising. I take my daughters camping all the time, so I'm comfortable roughing it a little bit.
Hopefully, we get you there next year.
Wow, I would love that. We talked about behavioral finance when you and I started talking and how psychology can shape markets and decision making and all of that. One of the things I really want to explore with you today is, when I talk about money, when I talk about any part of this equation, I talk about 3 things: the mechanic of investing, the psychology of investing, and the purpose of investing. And fundamentally, it's my belief that until you get the purpose piece down, mechanics are helpful and psychology can keep you out of trouble, but it kind of doesn't come together. How do you think about that equation? Mechanics, psychology, purpose, like how do you lay the balance?
If you're an institution with a very long time horizon, you look through one lens. If you're a family office and you have a generation or two, a different lens. And if you are an 82-year-old man and you've taken care of your family and your children and your grandchildren, then your lens has a very short time. So time horizon is so critical. Example, Harvard University is the richest university endowment fund in the world, I believe. It has 400 years of history. Harvard is older than the United States. Who ever would have said we need to think about longevity and a discipline on the investment policy of our endowment fund? Up until this year, if you would have made that statement, you would have been said, we don't need you on the foundation board anymore. Look at the
I,
change.
I hear you, but this is where mechanics and maybe a little history goes a long way. Liquidity is like oxygen. You don't miss it until you need it. And so to me, one of the things that has become kind of transparent through this, but I think instinctively we knew it, is I get it, you guys. You've got this infinite horizon, and there is a perception that maybe there is an arbitrage by going into illiquid private markets. But at some point, when you need the cash, breaking the piggy bank is kind of mission critical, and knowing how you're going to liquidate. Like, if you are the richest institution in the world, and as you noted, you're older than the United States itself, maybe you have a plan for surviving any random 4-year period.
Well, you raise the point, and we are in the times of change that are so dramatic. I'm looking at this proposal to allow private equity positioning in 401ks. Now, you and I know that whether you like the stock or don't like the stock, you can turn it into cash in 11 seconds. You may own a bond and not like the price because interest rates went up, but you can turn it into cash rapidly. You could do that with metal. It might hurt your foot if it dropped on your foot, but you could turn it into cash. What do you do with a private equity deal in a 401k when somebody gets sick and you have to liquidate? Whether we like it or not, the world is evolving right now before our eyes in ways, had we had this discussion 2 or 3 or 4 years ago, we would not have contemplated these types of changes. But they're coming. Now, we can debate all day long. Should they come? Wouldn't they come? Are they good? Are they bad? That's not what's relevant. What's relevant, as Daniel Kahneman taught so well, is not how you feel about it right now, but look at it, grasp the trajectory in real, tangible terms. And if a change is coming, act. Yeah, I think that's a quick summary.
No, I think that's right. I mean, look, I just wrote in my latest newsletter some version of when will you know that it's gone too far? And I, of course, quickly answered, you won't. And you won't until you can't act. And that's fundamentally the challenge, right? Which is to make decisions in the face of uncertainty. And that's the sheer nature of decision making in the real world. And I think you're right about, as a societal matter, these forces are bigger than you, they're bigger than me. Though I think, and obviously you've made more than your fair share of contributions to the public discourse, to the public debate over your lifetime. But I look at this and I worry. I worry that people don't understand illiquidity, and I worry that people think there is return magic in the world, where I don't believe there is return magic. Equity is equity, and sometimes it's private and sometimes it's liquid, so on and so forth. Now you add leverage a bunch of investments, and if you're lucky, see what happens, and it becomes a selling argument. But I think you just pointed something out which is very important. Forget all the societal stuff. The reality is, I think there's a callous view that for a variety of reasons that a subclass of people might have oversaved for retirement. I think I heard someone say these assets will never be touched anyway, so why not shove private equity in them? The problem is, there is the unintended consequence. There is the person who actually is going to need the cash, and it might cause harm.
If we knew precisely the day we would die, we could plan to be completely impoverished at midnight of that day. But we don't. So our nature, the nature of the human being is to have excess savings. Therefore, we have savings. We deploy the savings, which is how we have capital to invest. And in good times, we have a resulting increase in productivity from that investment. This is classic economic thought. And that productivity makes our lives more comfortable, more efficient. We live longer. We find new medical treatments. We develop things. That's the cycle. The question is when you disrupt the cycle with change, it can be good or bad. That depends on the outcome to each person. But the force of disruption itself shocks the human being, and the human being prefers stasis. We would like everything to be calm. That's our nature.
Just like my dog. My dog is just happy to sit on the couch.
Scratch his belly and make sure your dog is fed and everybody's happy, right?
Yep.
So
I feel like you've met my dog.
vicariously. So here's the question. If you are in a period of rapid change, disruptive change, then do you make your investment decisions, your lifestyle decisions, your familial decisions with the same rules and paradigm that you had in the period of stasis? Or do you have to sort of grab yourself and say, wait a minute, I'm in a tariffs world. I'm in a world of rising defense budgets. I'm in a world of more fear of a personal nature. And I'm watching the person who works in hospitality in a hotel that I visit now operate with greater fear. These are powerful forces. And as we know, fear is very much more powerful than the positive side. So the interdependencies, and I've been very active, as you know, in the Global Interdependence Center. I was its program chair. I chaired its central banking series worldwide for a number of years. The interdependency issue that we are used to for the last 30 or 40 years, which was positive interdependencies, reduction of barriers, reduction of tariffs, expansion of trade, greater exchanges, more information flows, more free movement of people, has encountered forces which are reversing it. That is disruption, number one. Interdependence has a negative structure too. We're witnessing it. And at the same time, if we are shepherds of wealth in our professional careers, and we are still applying the rules from the former system while we're having to negotiate our trajectory through the present and coming system, we're using the wrong rules. We're eating with the fork instead of the spoon. We're going to spill it on our shirt.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think it's one of those things where having, flexible mental models as opposed to overly optimized mechanical models becomes helpful. This is an incredible conversation, and I'm so grateful we're having it. I have a million more questions, but we've been talking for a while. I guess we can always have, episode two of this conversation, but I close every conversation with a set of rapid fire questions, and I'll tell you more about them in a minute. But I can't help but ask for, I guess, a piece of guidance for someone like myself, because I really think that what you're embodying is really important, which is weirdly, and maybe this is the nature of the system that we live in, some of us who are in the kind of money world have an imperative to be kind of town square intellectuals and try to move the conversation forward, societally speaking, beyond the world of money. So I guess as you think about your contribution, and I hesitate to use the term legacy, what's your definition of a life well lived in finance?
One, of course, it's better to have a win and make a profit than a loss. So if you look at the tally and you say, I've had more wins than losses, that's professional success. No one that I know has 100% batting average. The lesson in finance then is to limit the losses. Much harder because we're human. So it's very difficult. And the retrospective, I guess you could go all the way back to Livermore's book, but the retrospective is where I make the mistake and make a new one. Don't repeat the old one. If you're able to do that, that's a very hard thing too. I would say one other element, and this comes from somebody who's 82 years old. So there's a presumption of uh, aging out slowly, but still getting a little attention from people. Try to grow older graciously, patiently, when the forces of aging are working against you. And that's the civility issue where we started the conversation a few minutes ago. So those are my life lessons.
Wow, I think I'll be carrying those with me for a long time, and I know everybody listening will as well. So thank you for your generosity. So as I mentioned to you earlier, I grew up in Paris. I was bathed in, of course, French TV, and there was a TV show when I was growing up, hosted by Bernard Pivot. It was a literary cultural program, and he asked a series of questions to every one of his guests. And of course, the same series of questions was adapted to American TV by James Lipton on the Actor Studio. So are you ready for a quick, rapid fire set of questions?
I'll do the best I can.
What's your favorite word?
Yes.
What's your least favorite word?
No.
What's a sound or a noise you love?
Soft music, classical, Mozart, maybe chamber music.
What's a sound or a noise you hate?
I hate an explosion that's loud, and this requires an extra minute. Remember, I heard one in the World Trade Center, and in a younger time in my life, it was the explosion of an artillery shell 10 feet away.
Where was this?
There was training in a combat infantry course in Texas in 1966. I was in the Army from 66 to 69. And when I got out of the World Trade Center and saw the second explosion from the street, I instinctively counted flash to bang time to measure the distance, and the recollection of the sound of that explosion was immediately triggered from the time I was crawling in a combat infantry course next to an artillery pit in Texas many years earlier.
Wow.
That's not a rapid answer. I'm sorry.
No, but again, we'll take it. What's your favorite curse word?
Shit.
Who would you like to see on a new banknote?
I'm happy with the banknotes that show pictures of great Americans.
What profession, other than your own, obviously, would you never want to attempt?
Neurosurgery.
If you're reincarnated as a plant or an animal, what would it be?
Parsley.
Parsley, tell me more.
Well, number one, it's used for decoration. Number two, no one thinks about it, but it's there. It's ubiquitous in its usage. And number three, it imparts a pleasant aroma and flavor when you use it in cooking.
That makes a lot of sense to me. Last question. Are you ready?
I don't know what's coming after this.
If heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you get to the pearly gates?
I would like to hear God say, I know I made a mistake or two along the way, but I did the best I could. And Daniel Kahneman hadn't written his book yet.
Well, this was an extraordinary conversation. I could not be more grateful, David. Thank you so much.
Well, thanks for the time. It's nice to chat with you now. Next year, Maine, come join us.
Not even a question. Absolutely.
This podcast is for entertainment and education only. Nothing here is financial advice. Treussard Capital Management is a registered investment advisor. Please visit our website, www.treussard.com, for additional information and disclaimers.